Are they missing entire 1099s because you can't help provide oversight to them and haven't even approached them about it? And are they asking for or needing tax analysis and planning and you never get around to it? All
Right.
because there are way too many people crammed into your practice, all paying way too little.
You're listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Louis Prosperi. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm Louis Prosperi. Our guest is an acclaimed speaker, trainer, and creator of the Scaling New Heights conference, Joe Woodard. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Louis.
This is going to be a really fun show, Joe, because we're going to talk about all your favorite topics, what's new and upcoming in 2024. And what I'd love to start with is the most interesting, fun, exciting component, which is compliance. So tell us a little bit about compliance and what we have to do to make sure we're on track this year.
Well, compliance, some people may say, well, how's that different than any other year, right? I mean, we basically have been dealing with compliance, since the inception of the profession. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is one of the big 5 things, which you challenged me to kind of surface up here today. One of the big ones is the fact that compliance has become such a moving target. I mean, just within the last 24 hours of recording this podcast, we're recording early March 2024. Just within the last 24 hours, we've had BOI challenged by an Alabama federal judge, where it's been ruled or deemed unconstitutional. Not for everybody, but for some people. So now we have to go back after having just watched all of this, gotten all this CPE on BOI. And we have to figure out, okay, now how has it changed in the last 24 hours? Which, by the way, is happening right in the middle of tax season. And are accountants even responsible for this? Can they be responsible for this without practicing law without a license, which is another big debate? And all of this is hitting us broadside from a regulation that is still an infant. I mean, it's only been around for months, not years. And that's just one. Right. Then you start multiplying the 50 states of the United States of America, and you start dealing with all their different HR compliance rules, many of which have been birthed out of COVID, virtual work environments. The most pressing one that we have to pay attention to is, are our clients paying their people for the business use of their homes? Well, California started it, but other states are picking it up. Right. So my biggest tip to your listeners, Louis, not that we're going to break down every single one of these. There's ESG and there's all sorts of state and local tax compliance issues. Enforcement is going through the roof right now with the IRS staff increases that we've had. The takeaway for the context of this podcast episode is not to bring you up to speed on all the compliance issues. Is to say either be really good at it or use your engagement letters to clearly stay clear of it. But if you think that your clients are going to assume it is not your purview just because you're not a tax preparer, not a CPA, not an HR consultant, not doing their payroll, that's not what happens. And you will end up with, at least in their minds, some kind of responsibility and exposure.
That's interesting because you highlighted something that the accountant's role seems to be expanding compared to the old days, right? And the old days was we had to just calculate the tax or basically do the financial numbers. Now we're involved in so many other aspects, right? And you hit it right on the head there with regards to HR and so forth. So I really like the fact that you brought it up in the engagement letter. Let's talk about compliance with an engagement letter. Don't you agree that the engagement letter is probably one of the most critical components of and it should be the thing that you should make sure everybody signs before you start an engagement?
Absolutely. And I would even go so far as to say it isn't just about passing peer review. We've typically looked at engagement letters as do they or do they not pass peer review? So they've almost been like a necessary evil for us. And we're not doing enough as an industry to involve well-informed professional service attorneys in the process. And we're not treating the relationship with the client as a contract, which it should be. So if I'm going to engage, and I've done a lot of contract work for very large companies like Intuit, Sage, Xero, right? When you start dealing with these multi-billion-dollar global companies, they're going to send you two different kinds of documents. They're going to have a master services agreement, which is going to have a lot of legal language in it that protects them and protects you, and defines the overall nature of the relationship. And then they're going to have statements of work. And the statements of work are governed by the master services agreement. Well, within the accounting profession, we're lucky just to even get an engagement letter, which in this comparison is the statement of work.
Yeah.
But a statement of work that isn't governed by a master services agreement or a contract that's managed by an attorney creates a tremendous amount of unnecessary exposure. And increasingly, the insurance companies are picking up on this, and they're beginning to charge higher premiums or even deny coverage to firms that don't have the proper protections in place with contracts. So I would go so far as to say, yes, engagement letters at a minimum, actual client contracts are the goal.
And you actually hit it right on the head, because we in the accounting industry, basically it's peer review. It's all about, it's even very specific. It's specific to maybe year-end work or so forth. Meanwhile, the whole year you're engaging them with so many other components that doesn't even touch that engagement letter. So I agree with you. The engagement letter is should only be a small part of the actual agreement that you put in place. Right? That's fantastic. So with regards to compliance, it's a moving target. How do you stay on track? Like, let's say you are in the compliance business, right? Because a lot of accountants do a lot of tax information. What should they implement in their practice, or have some sort of processes that allows them to keep track? Do you have any suggestions to help?
Yeah, well, I mean, you would want to use some kind of a process solution that manages due dates and compliance issues, that maybe even surfaces up, hey, when I start opening up tax return compliance in a particular state, we need to look at the broader issues. So that's why I was saying, if you're going to get into it fully, stay informed. And like you just added, great point, Louis, add process, because if not, you're going to miss something. But this kind of gets me into a larger bucket, which is client accounting services. That would be another big thing they need to focus on, and it overlaps with compliance. So if you're going to get into the compliance business beyond tax compliance, income tax compliance specifically, then you need to put it inside the envelope or the umbrella of client accounting services. Because if I'm not responsible for the client's accounting or even their back office processing that they've outsourced to me, called BPO, if I'm not responsible for enough of it and I can't see what's going on in the company until it's too late, why would I, or how could I even accept responsibility for HR compliance when I find out 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later that they've even done business in that state or hired somebody in that state? So stay away from any compliance that is outside the scope and the nature of what you do. And if you're a tax preparer only, that means that you're going to just stick with the income tax compliance. All the others, the state and local taxes, are SALT, which is a big growing area right now.
Right.
And back office process outsourcing, which would start picking up business licenses, local property tax compliance, things like that. All of that fits into this bucket of client accounting services, of which record keeping, or otherwise known as bookkeeping, is just one leg of the stool. And this compliance issue for all of the back office is another leg of the stool. And then there's a controllership leg of the stool too, that would make it truly CAS. So I'm picking up things like spend management, budgeting, forecasting, some purchase controls, maybe some cash flow projections, things like that.
Wow, that's a lot to swallow.
It's a lot of work to do out there.
Yeah, I could imagine. Well, there's one thing with just this alone, it'll definitely keep accountants busy.
Oh, yes.
I don't think you have a shortage of work here at all. You know, what about pricing? Because the interesting thing is, when we talk about compliance, moving target, level of complexity, this goes now into the ability for supply and demand of services. Because if it's difficult for the accountant to keep track, I'm assuming the customer, which is the business owner, he's he's struggling even more, right? So he's trying to find these professionals. So what do we talk about pricing and how that now will have to impact? We have to change our pricing model, no, or understand pricing better. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, we do. We have to do both. We have to change the model. We have to understand it better. And I add a third, we have to do some corrective actions as an industry. So I want to start with the third one. We are in a supply demand economic that favors the suppliers. And it's economics 101. If you have a supply shortage that can't meet all the demand of the market, then you increase price. And that
Right.
doesn't make us opportunistic. It just means we're obeying the foundations of any economic principles. And what it actually does is it protects the consumer, it protects the overall market from over promising and under delivering by not being able to resource within your firm what you're offering and not being able to supply the kind of expertise at the rates they're demanding. Believe me, the employees have picked up on the same supply demand economic issue. They're asking for more and more money. They're not staying at firms that don't compensate them well. So the firms are being asked to either have high employee turnover, client loses, not hire people with enough expertise, client loses, or not be able to staff up accordingly to meet client demand and overpromising, under delivering, client loses. So
Yeah.
the reason that rates go up in a supply favored market where demand exceeds supply is to protect the consumer from overconsumption, right? Not only is it also a bedrock principle of economics. So it's just the laws of nature, and we're not obeying them, and it's creating a staffing crisis. It's creating a quality control crisis. It's creating clients who are underserved and not protected by their accountants properly. Everybody's losing.
So Joe, so the economics make sense to raise prices, right? It's an economic mechanism. Why don't accountants raise prices?
Well, a couple reasons. Fear, right? We're so afraid
Right.
of people leaving us. This fear of losing the business is pervasive in our industry, and we do have deep relationships. We're heavily involved with our clients at a business sense, a very intimate level.
Right.
Sometimes we've been with them a long time, and there's a due or undue sense of loyalty. All of these emotions kick in, but I think at the end of the day, we were so locked into the thought that every client is a good client and that more clients equals a more successful practice, that we can't unlearn what we've learned there. When in truth, you could have $1 million run rate every 34 clients. And that math is simple, right? You could do it in your head, about $2,500 a month. If that's your average monthly revenue per client, every 34 clients is $1 million. Whereas I coach firms when they first get to us, they might have 400 clients sub 1 million.
Right.
It's crazy out there. Now, I know that didn't include tax. I was talking CAS, right? On
Right.
that 2,500 a month. But that would be another admonition I would give is, why would you just do a tax return where you might be charging the client effectively $600 a month, $5,000 a year, when you could be doing the client accounting services and charging $3,000 a month inclusive of the tax return? So this is the two-headed beast. The two-headed beast is pricing and service. So the correction on price is, we're underpriced, not just for inflation and not just for supply demand, but because of legacy price anchors that we've let go too long. So is a corrective effort. And it isn't arbitrary and it isn't blind, and you shouldn't be anti-relational, but there is in almost every firm still a corrective action that needs to be taken. All right. Second is, we've got to elevate the services like we talked about with the CAS, including the controllership, and then price to that increased value. And when we do both of those things, you're starting to look at targets of maybe $1,500 a month minimum to even enter my practice, and about $2,500 a month average monthly revenue. per client.
So,
And
so
then you start to build an amazing practice.
when you talk about service CAS services, and when we're talking about monthly, a lot of companies or a lot of accounting firms have what we call yearly, one time a year customers. And that's when you get to 3, 4, 500 customer level. What's interesting is to generate $1 million with a 1 year or transactional relationship, which is what I call the year end transaction. You need 300 to do 34. I'm just looking at your math, the way you designed your math there. 34 customers when you have a direct relationship and interaction and transformational type of service is probably a lot easier to manage than 400 customers. Am I wrong on that?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And that's the cost that the accountants don't consider, that account management cost. And it is real. And it includes infrastructural software, administrative workers, customer service demands, just the amount of touches involved, like we were talking about with engagement letters, statements of work, client contracts. There's a cost to maintain a relationship. But there's also a diminished value when you have too many people packing in at too low of a price. So the metaphor I use for this is the HOV lanes, which are largely a failure in most cities. And the reason that they're no better usually in any given day than the other lanes is because there's not a high enough cost barrier to participate. All you have to have is an electric car with a once a year toll tag, or just, one person in your car, which if you have kids or a spouse, whatever you typically have anyway, and you're automatically in that lane. There's no cost to adoption. But where we're succeeding, to keep that metaphor going, are those lanes that have variable price points based off of compression in the lane, cameras, everything's in real time. They're value pricing it based on how much you save in your commute that day. And you're paying up to $8, $9, even $10 just to ride the rails of that lane for about 10, 15 miles, which means it has to really matter to you. It has to be really valuable to you. Now, this is what I want every listener to catch here, because a lot of people think, well, but this client's good to me and I'm already profitable with this client here, so why would I charge them more, or whatever it may be? The problem is not that you're not profitable. The problem is how many clients are shoved into your HOV lane.
Yeah.
And what is their experience as a result of being crammed into that? Are they being forced to extend their returns, or do they experience undue pressure from you to extend their returns? Or are they having to extend because you didn't give them the amount of attention that you could have given them in December to help them prepare for the end of the year? Are they missing entire 1099s because you can't help provide oversight to them and haven't even approached them about it? And are they asking for or needing tax analysis and planning and you never get around to it? All because there are way too many people crammed into your practice, all paying way too little.
Right. It's like those famous things about LA traffic, right? There's a traffic jam 24/7, and when you're in a traffic jam, very little gets done, right? It's just So here's the thing that I hear pushback, because I am a believer of what you're saying. So it's not like you have to convince me. You're kind of preaching to the choir, Joe. But here's the pushback that I get a lot is, well, no one's going to want that service, or that service. No one's going to pay that number, or do you get that pushback? Like, oh, it's good for that guy, but it's not good for my business because my business is different than that guy's business. How many times have you heard that?
I've heard it a lot. And what they're effectively saying is not that their business is different. They're saying one of two things. They're either saying my vision is different. My vision is to help the very small who otherwise might be disenfranchised. And I would say if that's your vision, that's admirable. However, go ahead and file for a 501c3, be a nonprofit, come alongside, get the government grants. I know it sounds like I'm making a joke, and it's kind of a funny statement, but I'm being dead serious. If you want to be a small business development center, you are going to be a nonprofit. And just go ahead and declare it, right? And don't think just about, am I providing for my family and getting the job done while I'm providing an amazing service to humanity? Because again, that's noble. the thing you have to think about is the long-term accumulation of wealth and the overall valuation of the practice. What legacy are you leaving your successors? Maybe your children are those successors. What wealth are you leaving them for their inheritance? What's left behind when you leave? And if it's a firm that's based off of very low dollar amounts with an altruistic, help the small business owner mindset, then you're not leaving behind the kind of firm somebody would want to buy. There is no inheritance there, and there's not a lot of retirement for you. When you stop working, you stop making money, and you haven't accumulated wealth for your own retirement. So again, noble, but please go ahead and use the funds that are available to you, the taxpayers are paying for, to assist these small businesses and be a nonprofit. You can pay yourself a very, very handsome and fair salary as the head of a nonprofit. Now, that only slightly tongue-in-cheek, Louis, but very real is my guidance there. The other thing I would tell them is that you don't have the luxury of playing there anymore, because that could be your vision, that could be your passion, and it could have been your historical success. And I'll use success with a little bit of air quotes because success is relative.
Right.
However, it's imminently being disrupted. H&R Block, Pilot, Bench, Intuit with QuickBooks Live product, and now LegalZoom, right?
Yeah.
With two Intuit executive veterans leading the charge over there that went from Intuit to LegalZoom, are all getting into this space. And they all have the ability to service that very small client with the kind of technology that you can't do. They've got billions to invest in market penetration, marketing, brand, market development, and technology development to code custom and proprietary solutions, to hire people at scale in gig economies. And they are going to completely consume this sub 1 million in revenue client market in terms of the client's revenue. So it's either move up or get displaced. And I don't mean to be the Chicken Little here on the call, but that's what's happening.
So what I really enjoyed about that nonprofit part is because I always say to people, because every accounting firm or every person that's an accountant for most part wants to give something back. So my analogy on that is always, okay, set up a 10% charity fund in your practice, right? Set it up, make it a dollar value of 10, 15, 20, whatever number you want, fill it up. And once it's filled, do not bring any more else in there, right? To me, the reason why I say that to them is so it allows them to no longer have that excuse to move up, right? Because I find that that's the biggest hurdle that I find.
It is so funny that you recommend
the
that.
nonprofit one was that, because I love that.
Well, the nonprofit one was a little slightly hyperbolic, but only slightly, because there are grant funds out there and people could be more successful at their vision. So take it as serious advice if that's your vision, and go pursue those options. But Louis, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because we've been coaching our practices to do that same thing, to have, we call it the pro bono budget. Lawyers have it too, right? And spend it down like any form of charity. And then you get to give that gift back that's part of your life goal. I love that.
And I love what you talked about. What's interesting when people talk about the small entrepreneur, which is, it depends where you are. You said sub $1 million, but there's a lot of practices around 500,000 or less. And at one time we could sustain and probably do those as independent accounting firms. But the level of technology you need to service those firms in today's market, to automate it, is no longer a small business option. I think you're right. I think the bigger firms will definitely prosper more there than what we call our entrepreneurial accountant. So that was very intuitive. I think because that's where they are. You're absolutely right. The Intuits, the Pilots, that's where they live. And I think they'll do a better job than we will. So that makes perfect sense.
Eventually. Currently, they're not, because they're getting a feel for it, but eventually they will solve for the problem at scale. Yes.
Yeah, but we know the complexity. When you have 1,000 customers at $500, the complexity to service 1,000 customers effectively compared to the 34 that you just talked about, right? Let's be honest, right? It's completely different. Valuation and profitability. Let's talk a little bit about that, because they're not necessarily the same thing, and it is a major issue coming down for 2024.
That's true. Yes. And the reason it's a major issue, you've been watching the same thing too, Louis, is the market aggregation that's taking place. Billions and billions of dollars are being infused into the market by PE firms for market aggregation, for inorganic growth. And it
Right.
used to be that all of this stuff played around on Mount Olympus, and the firms that were, say, below 5 million in revenue, we were just the mere mortals, and every once in a while we'd
Right.
hear thunder from what was happening up above, right? But
I really like that.
that's not what's happening now, right? What's happening
Right.
now is these PE firms are investing through different companies to reach into the small firm space, and they're buying books of business. That's the first thing they're buying. Second thing they're buying is entire practices. Books of
Right.
business is going to be the highest volume game, obviously. Buying practices is something that some people are invested in. It's going to be a much smaller sliver of what's happening with the aggregation play. Most of the people that are buying these books of business have far exceeded the skill sets of any local firm. Like you mentioned, they have resources that the local mom and pop firms just don't have. And they've built out perfected CAS at scale, but they're not doing it like Pilot or Bench or QuickBooks Live or H&R Block. They're doing it like actual accounting firms. They've just created extreme efficiencies. And I'll tell you where they're really making a difference here, Louis. They're big enough that they don't have to outsource to India or Costa
Right.
Rica or South Africa or the Philippines, the 4 big hot countries for outsourcing. They don't have to outsource to those countries. They just open offices in those countries. And they have employees, W-2
Okay.
employees in those countries, because they're global entities, or they can
Right.
afford to sustain global operations. And then they're getting the best of both worlds. They're getting the non-margin induced India pay rates or Costa Rica pay rates with the kind of quality controls of it being a full-time employee of the firm. Now you start layering in research and development budgets where they can do their own AI programming, they can create proprietary automation platforms, then have employees sitting somewhere in Costa Rica with the quality assurance of a US or North American or Canadian or US, I should say, employee, then there is no way that the mom and pops can compete with them, say, up above the 1 million rate. So what's happening here, Louis, we're in a vice. The we meaning
Okay.
the traditional small firm, they're in a vice. Coming from the bottom are all of these scaled Walmarts of accounting, right? The big box companies. Coming from the sky downward, compressing the small firm space, are the very large players that are reaching down market and doing it at extreme economies of scale and capital.
Right.
Sitting in the middle is something that's going to get into a pressure cooker. To a large degree, 3 things are going to happen. And this is why I'm getting back to your valuation question. 3 things are going to happen. Either that small firm, and by small, I mean somewhere between maybe $500,000 in revenue and $5 million in revenue. That small firm is going to sell. They're going to go out of business, or they're going to survive. There's really only 3 choices, right?
Well,
And
you hit all 3
you don't have
choices.
to be
So I don't
rocket
think we can
science to
have.
figure
I
out
don't, I
those are
don't
the only
think. I
3
don't think there's
choices.
a 4th one.
Yeah, there is no 4th one. Exactly, unless you can go colonize Mars or something. So
Well, okay, fair enough.
but
Mars.
yeah, so yeah, but the point is, it's that third one that's there is gonna be this niche or cottage industry of people that say, okay, we've carved it out, we figured it out, we've learned how to exist in this bubble that remains between the gods of Olympus at the bottom and the gods of Olympus coming from the top. But most of the firms are going to end up selling, and
Right.
that means valuation is more important than ever. And valuation is not necessarily, like you said, equated to profitability or EBITDA. A lot of firms, if they're buying your book of business, are going to do multiples of revenue, not multiples of EBITDA. Okay. So if you feel like you're stronger on revenue than you are on your profitability, then go
Profits.
for those
Yeah.
buyers. Second, a lot of buyers that want to buy firms and not books of business, they want to buy intellectual properties.
Right.
So if that's the kind of firm you want to sell to, focus on your process, focus on your technology, focus on your team, create something, an asset that somebody would want to buy.
Right. So that's interesting. I like the three options. That was pretty good. And the fourth is go to Mars.
Well,
I really
what
enjoyed
else
that.
is there? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, and you might the Mars one, Elon might take you there because I
Who
think he's planning
knows?
to
I
go,
mean,
right? So
yeah.
who knows? So the other one is practice and planning and AI. I'm going to put these two together because technically, I think AI is going to be. For the accounting industry, I think it's in its infancy, but that doesn't mean that it won't grow faster than innovations. If you look at our industry, they were slower, but they got faster and faster and faster. I think this AI innovation that's coming in will probably become the norm faster than anything else that's happened in the past, I think. So practice planning in AI. Do you mind just highlighting what you think on those areas and where that's going or where we should be going on in there?
Yeah. So if you're talking about practice planning, there are 7 key areas of practice planning, one of which is tech. So I'm gonna save that one till last and then drill down on it, because at this age, I agree with you. In 2024, it's the most important of the 7, or at least it's the one of the 7 that you have to pay the most attention to, because it's a rapidly changing landscape. So
Right.
the 7 areas of practice planning, to rattle them off, would be your brand, and underneath that would be whatever marketing you do. So that's all one. Number 2
Sure.
would be your service slate. We did a lot of talking about that here in this podcast episode. Your ideal client profile. So you want to make sure you're servicing the kind of client that needs controllership, that needs all those compliance, that needs their journey protected and will pay the $2,500 or so a month.
Right.
You want to have an ideal process, which you mentioned, Louis, is a really important piece, whether it's compliance, that's what you're referring to, or just anything you're doing, CAS, tax. That process has to be standardized, infused into a system like a workflow solution, and democratized, meaning trained for consistent use throughout the team. You want to make sure your engagements are under some sort of a planned structure. That gets us back to that whole contract statement of work thing we talked about.
Right.
Don't forget change orders, right? And make sure that you engage an attorney. And then an ideal team. And how do you manage people? How do you lead people? How do you build a positive company culture? How do you reduce employee turnover, incentivize employees, not just with compensation, but with also work-life synergy and overall sense of purpose? And
Right.
then to hit your one that you say best for last, the one you mentioned is technology. So it's brand, services, client, process, engagement, team, and then tech. Now, if you'll have that kind of a 7-fold plan, and then make sure you're watching this AI very closely when you're building out the tech, then you're going to have an intentional practice that could just end up either being highly valued or end up being on Mars. I'm sorry, could end up surviving the disruption and being that
Right.
thriving business in that cottage industry. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So-
So the 7-point plan makes sense, and I think the AI is something that's going to be morphing. Right now you're going to hear a ton of stuff in AI. I agree with you, and I think this year will probably be a critical one. What do you suggest? You suggested jumping in AI right now, or should you dip your toe, or should you wait and see? What do you think about the AI with regards to incorporating into your tech? Is
Yeah,
it
I
still
think
too
watch
early
it.
to make it?
I think watch it. Don't adopt it too early. And
Okay.
one of the biggest cautions I would give everyone listening here is be careful with privacy and security. The information, whenever ChatGPT first came out, accountants just started going toward like having it ingest entire balance sheets, profit and loss, and just telling it
Oh,
all this
really? Okay.
client sensitive
Yeah.
information, not realizing, because who reads the user agreements on these things, not realizing all of that information gets ingested into the public space. None of that's private.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
since then, they've come out with pay-to-play privatized versions of these platforms. But if you're not using the right versions of the platforms, everything you type in there becomes part of the public domain. And so that's
Right.
caution. Number 2 is it's an infant. It may be something you're going to want to adopt one day, but right now, it has a lot of errors. And it's a very immature piece of technology. Plus, it is a platform more than it's a solution. So the people that
Right.
are getting the best use out of this, Louis, are not the accounting firms. It's the programmers. The programmers who know how to ask the right questions. Because just like any child, how you frame the question is the only way you're going to get the answer, right?
Very, very good.
So
Yes.
yeah, so they know how to frame the question where the child, called AI, will understand it. Those technology providers also, if they're doing their job right, they tokenize the information. So they will call to the artificial intelligence, use it in order to deliver out a result for you, but they mask all the private information about your client. And they don't fold that back in till it reaches your desk inside their product. Well, that protects you, protects the client.
Right.
So the short answer to your question is, what should you do with AI in the next 12 months? You should prioritize solutions developed by other people that use AI aggressively. Don't go out to just chat GPT and think it's going to solve all your problems.
So yeah, so you're saying third party that are using AI and do your research. It sounds to me like do your research, particularly for accountants or lawyers, anywhere where you have confidential information. If you don't know how it's working or you don't know how the protection's in place, maybe hold off a bit. That
Well,
makes
I would
perfect
recommend
sense.
that of any technology, just while we're on this tech topic. Any tech.
Yeah.
I mean, you should go through a vetting process, accountants, on anything, bookkeepers, on anything you're using, to make sure that their privacy and security policies are going to protect the client and protect your practice. Now, there's a standard out, you know it very well, Luke, called SOC 2. And if you're
Yeah.
SOC 2 compliant, then that an independent auditor has already done all of that vetting about security and privacy protocols and platform security protections for you. So that's good. But I would not recommend using any solution that isn't SOC 2 compliant.
Well, that's actually, it wasn't part of our discussion, but I think I'd like to end here on the SOC 2, which is because one of the things that we talk about constantly is with the automation process is putting in programs, tools, resources that are third party. So um, I guess the best thing if you're an accountant out there who's got a practice and using third party, the first thing is investigate if they got SOC 2 security. If not, maybe change the software you're using. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Should be a table stake.
Fantastic. Well, I know we can keep going, but I'm gonna end it here on a very good note. I really loved our conversation, Joe. Uh, Joe, I think you've got a conference coming up soon. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called Scaling New Heights. Happens every June. It's going to be in Orlando this year.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to recommend everyone. It's probably the premier conference event that I've ever been to. It's great content. It's a lot of fun, by the way, Joe. You make them extremely fun. So, and I have always enjoyed coming to your conferences from day one. So if I can just give my personal recommendation to the event, it's one of the top ones that if I have to go to any conference in the US, it's that one.
Well, thank you, Louis. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
So now, Joe, if someone wants to get a hold of you personally or get a hold of your organization and try to figure out how to do that 34 clients per million, how would they be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, it's just my last name. Just make sure you use one W. It's Woodard, not Woodward. So
Okay.
Woodard, Woodard.com, and it'll get you to me, but it'll also get you to all of those programs that help you to make $1 million off 34 clients.
That's fantastic. Thanks again, Joe.
All right, great to be here, Louis.
That wraps up another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with Louis Prosperi. For more information and to access the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening and have a great week.